On this week's The Next Interview with our host Doland White, you'll hear Lisa A. Riegel explain exactly why change fails in most organizations and how leaders can use brain science to make it stick.
Most leaders are working harder than they need to, and they're getting less done than they should. And this is because decisions, accountability, execution still all have to run through them. That's not sustainable, and it's certainly not necessary. In Lead with Confidence, I break down how to create a team that moves without waiting for you. If that matters, grab your copy. The link's in the show notes. Now let's get to the podcast episode. Welcome to the Next Interview Show podcast. I'm Doland White, and as Liam, my announcer, mentioned when we came through the front door, I am the host of the podcast. And I know I say this frequently on the podcast, but I am always blessed to have the quality and caliber of guests on the podcast that I have and the conversations that I get to enjoy. And today is by far no exception. And today on the podcast, we have Dr. Lisa Riegel, and as in Riegel. And I have permission to call her Lisa, so that's the last time I'll be calling you doctor after that point in time. And
that's fine.
I want to just every podcast starts with gratitude. There's 1,000 other places you could be and other things you could be doing. And I just want to tell you, thank you for taking time to be here with me for the next half hour, 40 minutes, more likely 40 minutes, just to chat about leadership. And I think there's some very interesting insights that you'll bring to our conversation today. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be able to talk about my work and my approach to helping leaders be more successful.
Cool. That's what it's all about, right? We change lives. So of a very, very short bio, Lisa is a leadership expert and a neuroscientist, which is way cool, by the way. That's very cool. Who helps leaders turn change into lasting results by aligning behavior, habits, and systems with how the brain actually works. And you're also an author of 2 books. NeuroWell is your first book, and as we were just talking before we got started, your second book is Aspirations to Operations, and which just came out in February. So that's leaders that are listening to the podcast, go pick up a copy of the book. We'll talk about it later at the end. The URL will be in the show notes. But I want to just take just the first few minutes of the podcast, because people haven't met you yet, Lisa, just to talk about your journey and kind of your career path, and then a little bit of what you do. And then I know your first book, NeuroWell, was focused on educational systems. And then this is now a book that focuses in on leadership, how leaders get better at what they do, and including the neuroscience behind it, and kind of what that path looks like. And then we'll have a conversation.
Okay. Yeah, I have kind of a crooked path in my life. So I graduated from college with an English literature degree. So I went into sales. So I was a tech sales, and I actually sold the technology that's now OnStar, but it was before Westinghouse had purchased it. So I sold that and not at all in my wheelhouse. And then I went through a couple other jobs because they let everybody go because they took it back into R&D. And I ended up landing at a company that sold automatic greasing systems for semis and off-road construction equipment. And
wow.
I had never seen that equipment. I'm from suburbia. So by all measures, I was very successful. I was the only female in the world that wasn't a secretary. So they didn't really know what to do with me. But I was one of their top salespeople and really had a great career in front of me. And then I just looked in the mirror and I was like, I hate everything about my life. Like, I don't care if anybody buys grease. I don't care what I'm doing. This is not my path. What am I doing? So I quit everything. I was engaged, called that off, put a backpack on, and walked around Florida for a couple of weeks. And the beach is my place. And I just let my brain empty of all of these expectations. And then I came back from Florida and I was like, you know what? I want to work with kids. I want to help people realize their potential, and I want to help them be happy, because by all the metrics, I should have been thrilled and I wasn't. And so that kind of started my journey on being really interested in the people side of the system.
Yeah.
And then I ended up teaching for 9 years, and then I got into administration, and then I had an opportunity to do my fellowship at Ohio State.
Mhm.
And I did leadership, but instead of focusing on policy and structure, I really wanted to focus on the human system because, policies shape change, but people make change.
Right.
And the real change starts in the brain. So that was when I started really examining social sciences on motivation, engagement, and then also the actual biology of the brain and how can we use that to be more self-aware, self-regulated, have more self-control, and ultimately be better leaders so that we can help people be happy and fulfilled in their work.
I love that. I love it. It's funny you talk about that. There is no straight path. I wish there was a straight
No,
path.
no.
There is no
I
straight.
always tell my kids, I'm like, you know what? When you look behind you, all the dots connect, but when you look in front of you, you don't know where the next dot's going to be.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. Similar conversations with sons. Yeah, it's just like, guys, this is not
Yeah.
how you think it's going to go. It's not how it's going to go. Matter of fact,
No.
there's a saying I am from the South. So I grew up on the beaches in Florida, down in the Keys. So
Yeah.
love those beaches. So I appreciate why that could be your happy place. But I would tell my kids, it's like the more detailed you make the plan, the more specific you make the plan, the more God is going to laugh at you.
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
It's not going to go. It's just not going to go that way. So I love the fact that, your statement, you'll see me jot stuff down because I'm 73 next month. And at this point in time, if I don't write it down, it's gone.
It's gone.
But I love your statement around, policy shaping and people changing.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really interesting perspective because I think there is maybe the foundation for where we can start is I think leaders can have a propensity to think, well, if I've got SOPs and I've got books and manuals and 3-ring binders by the wazoo on the shelves, that's a technical term, wazoo, on the shelf, then I'm good to go because I've got all the policies and I've got all this stuff. And without dealing with the people side and the relationship we have with change, you don't move. So maybe before we get into the brain neuroscience, because I'll tell a secret, and when we get there, I'm really kind of curious about how you help leaders when you're working with leaders kind of through that process. To me, that's a paradigm. I've got the books, I've got the processes, and why the hell don't people just do what's in the book?
Do what I say. Yep.
Just do what I say. How do you help people kind of bridge that together?
Yeah. So one thing I oftentimes do is start with a lot of questions because I can usually hear the leadership weaknesses through the way they answer their questions. So for example, I've worked with leaders that say, well, my people hate meetings, or they are allergic to meetings. And I'm like, okay, so translation in my mind, you don't run purposeful meetings and you're not doing purposeful collaboration because people do hate meetings that are dumb, right? People don't hate meeting, they hate dumb meetings. So that then I mark down, okay, we need to work on some strategies for that. And then if they start with the whole, I just can't get them to comply and they do what they want and they don't want to change, they hate change. And I'm like, okay, so either you have a coherence problem where what you're asking them to do is not coherent with other things. So now you've set them up to fail.
Sure.
Or maybe you have a clarity problem. They don't know what you're asking them to do. Or maybe you have that you haven't addressed the humanity behind the resistance to change. And I think right now that's a big challenge for leaders because we are living in a very uncertain time. And uncertainty as AI enters and just, changes everything. How people deal with the fear of change and the emotional aspect of change is going to be a critical leadership skill.
Yeah, I agree. There is a lot of, that acronym FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? Because we're in an era thanks to decades of, MySpace to Facebook to I'm old. So I remember MySpace. That were my client for several years, but so MySpace to all the technology now where we live in headlines. and the headlines paint pictures, and that we imprint those pictures in our head, and then we make stories up around them. And AI is one of those things. There's two sides to the coin with AI, right? It's going to replace me, and I either need to go back to school and be a plumber, or I'm going to have to update my career somewhere. So how do you, one of the things that, so kind of through that process in working with people, how do you help that leader kind of recognize symptoms for terror barrier, right? Because there is that barrier, right? I'm a guy. First of all, I'm a guy. I'm wired as a guy. So my brain is that of a guy. And I love the fact that from a man's perspective, when we say we're not thinking about anything, we really are in a room with no windows, doors, or light. We really are not thinking. It's how we are. It's how we're wired. But how do you help with that leader? Let's talk about fear maybe for a minute, and then kind of use that to shift to trust and the brain science behind trust. How do you kind of help recognize that? How do you see fear in your organization? What are the symptoms that you look for?
Yeah, I actually really go right to what is going on in your body when you feel fear. And I generally start with leaders to say, you have to understand your own fears, because essentially all behavior, work behavior, social behavior, any behavior, anybody of any age, is the intersection of our biology and our context. So when we understand our biology, then we reframe problems that we see through a biological lens. And then ultimately we can influence the context around us, but also understanding how sort of this bigger context that we have no control over is impacting the biology in our brain. So basically the way it works, and what I usually start with leaders, is to say, okay, our brain is like a giant company. And so just like you're a leader in this company, the CEO of your brain is your prefrontal cortex. That's where your personality, your thinking, your morals, your character, that's where all of that lives. It doesn't actually do most of the thinking in our brain. 80% of the thinking is happening in the unconscious parts of our brain.
Yeah.
So a good leader who's going to lead this company needs to understand those departments. And so I talk about, when we think about fear, there's three different areas of the brain that are really important to it. The first is not really in the brain. The first is our vagal nerve. And the vagus nerve runs down our neck. There's a bundle around our heart, bundle around our stomach. And it's kind of like our systems manager. So it's there to say, like, is your heart pounding? Is your stomach emptying? And internally, are we doing okay? And then it's also looking at, where is your body in space? We have really poor proprioceptive input because of the way we live our lives, because we sit. So we actually don't know where our body is in space as well as we should. And so what that does is agitates that vagus nerve, and it sends messages to our data department. I named my data manager Harold. So Harold is my data manager. Harold's job, Harold talks to my vagus nerve, making sure systems are running.
Sure.
And then his job is to look in the environment and say, okay, what's happening? And the thing that's important is your limbic brain does not know time or a story. So Harold's not telling a story. Harold's just looking for associations. Like when you go into a place and you smell cookies and your body relaxes and you're like, oh, this is comfy, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about Harold's first thing is to get the information from the environment. And here's where context comes in. He goes into our amygdala, which is where we store sensory memories. And people think memories are like a giant library, and they're not. They're actually fragmented and stored all over your brain. So he makes these associations, and our body reacts the same way that it did in the past when those associations are happening. So when you think about, like, just even thinking about uncertainty as a trigger for fear. So what Harold's doing, if Harold's walking into a workplace and saying, I don't know what the hell's going on from day to day in here, and any minute I'm going to get fired. Or, when you work in those companies that seem to restructure every 3 months, and they go through all these big, people are walking into a setting of being unsure. Well, maybe in the past, during those times of uncertainty, they were left behind, or they were overlooked, or they were, hurt in some way. Their body and brain is going to react that same way. And so then Harold sends a message to your security monitor, who I call Bob. So Bob, decides, do I hit the panic button or do I really wail on it, right? If he just taps the panic button, a message goes up to the president of the company, which is you, that says, hey, we've got kind of conflicting ideas here for a response, so we need you to weigh in. If Bob decides what Harold is painting is a devastating picture and I should be afraid, he hits the panic button, sends a message that says, hey, boss, you need to go to Panera and get a cup of coffee because we've got a 5-alarm fire going on here. Harold and I will take care of it. We'll call you when it's safe to come back. And we have a lot of people right now who are living with Harold and Bob running their brains. And so as a leader, understanding first, what are the things that are triggering me? If somebody challenges me, what are my visions of who I am as a leader and how do the behaviors of the people around me impact me emotionally? And once I know that, sometimes I know that Harold makes faulty associations. So I can tell Harold, hey, don't do that. That's not the appropriate response.
Right.
But I can't do it if I'm not self-aware. So self-aware, self-regulation leads to self-control. And so I start with leaders doing that. And then when you start thinking about working with the staff, once I have that kind of knowledge, now if I look at you and I'm like, hey, why aren't you doing this? I can listen for the filters and I can hear them and I can be like, okay, this has nothing to do with this new software system. This has to do with the fact that this person is feeling like their sense of self and identity and expertise is going away and they're feeling threatened. Okay, so how do I coach them over the threat? Not, well, I'll get you more training. What's your problem? Go to the 22-year-old down the hallway. They'll tell you how to use the software, and then the person's like, what?
Or they get RTFM. There you go. Read the manual. There's a letter and F stands for something. This is a PG podcast. Right. We can't bring that up. Otherwise I got to call Gary Vaynerchuk and he'll say it for me. So I love that because I think, and I want to kind of explore the reciprocal side of that as well. I was blessed in my career as an executive. I get to travel to 14 countries, and I spent decades, about 30 years or so, in the software industry, high-tech industry, doing a plethora of stuff. Talk about no straight line. Everything from hunting bad guys with data with the FBI all the way to leading team. Anyway, fun stuff. And one of the things that I had a lot of fun doing, Lisa, was going all over the planet, working with engineers, people that were out doing software or working inside a body of organizations, and teaching them fundamentally triunal brain theory. Here's the things that are going on kind of when you walk in the room, and here's what's happening, and let me help you with your behavior to eliminate some of the stress on their side. So that's why I want to kind of I'd love to get your insights, because there's a reciprocal side to this. And I love the fact that you've named these components. That's so cool. Leaders, go back and listen to all of that again. Hit the rewind button on your phone. Go back and listen to that again and listen to it at 1x. Don't do 1.25. Just take the time to go do that, and name your body parts. I got to think about that. Or at least the parts associated with the brain. This is a PG podcast. So the one thing I'm curious on the reciprocal side, right? There is what's going on in that leader's mind, right? And particularly with their Bob and their Harold and kind of what they're going to do. And I love the fact I got my cup of coffee here. That just go get your cup, go drink coffee, and we'll call you when we're ready.
Yeah.
We got you. But how does that work then on the reciprocal side? Because as you were talking about that, I was thinking that's fascinating, because those things connect with how you represent yourself as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And how we represent ourselves sets a vibrational state, right? It's kind of like there's a rule that I teach leaders, which is it's hard to fake authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got an odor. People will smell it. So what's the reciprocal side of that? Because there's this piece here on how it works, but now I've got people that are in my presence.
Yeah. Well, and I think starting with the leader, if you're self-aware and if you understand how the brain works, then you're going to be more empathetic with the people, and you're going to be more in control. So you're going to be able to be more strategic about supporting them and making sure you're giving them what they need to maximize their potential.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think the byproduct of this is that you build trust in your teams and the trust isn't based on we're going to do a trust initiative. It's based on the fact that you are emotionally intelligent. And like, even when you're working with somebody who is struggling, like I tell people, like as leaders, like do the exercise, do a Harold and Bob exercise, have a conversation with your employees. And like I have in the book, I have a sort of triggers list, like what upsets you? Does it upset you when people give you feedback? Does it upset you? Do loud spaces upset you? Do, not knowing what you need to do to succeed, or, just different kinds of triggers, but then going a step below and saying, why is that? So for example, for many years, I had a bad relationship with time. If somebody was late, it made me angry. I had anxiety. Like I was always very much on time, and I still am to this day. I know where that comes from. So when I talk about those sensory associations, growing up, my parents were divorced and my dad was always late. So I spent hours and hours as a little 8-year-old sitting on my patio waiting for him to pick me up.
Right.
My brain associated time and love or worth, right? So once I understood that, once I started understanding how the brain works, because sometimes, like if my husband was running late, I would be so anxious and angry about it that it would take me time to calm down. And sometimes I would act like a fool, and then I'd be embarrassed, and then I would sometimes ruin my evening. Now I'm able to say, the CEO of my brain, and this is where you are truly in self-control, is I'm able to say, hey, Harold, stop connecting those two. That you're pulling the wrong memory. So now I'm truly a leader in my brain, right? I'm leading my brain to operate the way I want it to lead versus letting it run me around. And now, I still don't like to be late, but it doesn't make me anxious like it used to, and I don't get angry. And also because I know that association's there, even though it's a faulty association, I leave early. I'm always early. And some people are like, why are you always early? I'm like, because it keeps me calm. So I can be proactive about taking care of my own emotional state.
I think that's really important. There's a couple things in there that you said I want to touch on, and then I want to kind of make a right turn into trust. With your permission.
Sure.
the first thing is when you said lead your brain, and it is an association thing, right? There are things that precondition, right, that come with us, that are experiences that we've had in our life that kind of go along. When you're working with executives, there's a precarious balance, I think, sometimes between coaching and coaching, which is that thing. So as a coach, maybe two-part question. The first part is, how do you kind of recognize that association connection? There's something more going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a coach, most leadership coaches aren't qualified to unpack that.
Right.
And if they do, it could be harmful. So most leaders, because they're going to give bad advice, right? They're going to give things like willpower can solve it, and read your affirmation 10 times every day, and silly goofy stuff, right? So not that those things aren't important, but so how do you as a leader kind of recognize that how do you probe to find out what's around this? And then what's that barrier that you make on where you take that person? Do you send them somewhere? I think you get my gist.
Yeah. And I think it is a tough line we walk, because we do skirt right up to therapy sometimes as you're dealing with people. So the way I described it through that biology piece, like my work with them is, can we understand what is it that's triggering you? And if sometimes they don't know the why, like they might know they hate being late, but they have not made that association, and it's okay. You don't necessarily have to know why, but my goal is to really help them to understand what happens that deregulates you, because when you're not regulated, you're not leading. You're not leading yourself, and you're not leading others.
Yeah.
Harold and Bob are leading, right? So I start there, and then I always tell them too, the filters that are in our brain, those sensory memories that are there, they're always going to be there. So you can work with a therapist to unpack those. And if there's forgiveness or something that needs to be involved in how you shape those memories.
Mhm.
But the sensory memory, that's an episodic memory, right? So making meaning out of our, having an episodic memory that tells a story and a semantic memory, which makes meaning out of it, that takes a whole lot of cognitive thinking. So they have to remember those sensory associations are just sensory fragments. And so I don't really unpack the whole semantic. Sometimes they'll tell me about stuff, but I'm not telling them how to heal that relationship or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the important thing is then I say, okay, look, the first thing is being able to have self-awareness so that you can actually lead your brain to how you want it to organize these sensory memories. The second thing is that the solution to pollution is dilution. So if you are polluted with lots of negative memories, right, the solution to that pollution is dilution. So we need to actively create positive associations in the workplace or in our home or wherever we are. So you have ultimate control over that. So like when you were saying affirmations and things like that, there is kind of a place for that because the reason we want to do that is because if Harold is pulling all negative associations,
right,
if we are purposeful and intentional about making positive associations, he's going to pull those up and say to Bob, I don't know where to go. And Bob's going to say, well, let's just tap the button and ask the boss. So it's going to confuse that limbic system so that you stay in the leadership chair during those times.
Yeah, and I agree. And listen, I don't want the listeners to be confused by that because I do agree. Because as a matter of fact, I have an affirmation I read every morning.
Yeah.
Which is critically important to me. Been doing it for many, 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 many years. But it's an affirmation of not willpower. It's an affirmation of placement and a connection to something that I've modified and I remain committed to have modified.
Right.
So I love that. So say that one more time, listeners. Listen to the three pieces that you just talked about.
Yeah. So you want self-awareness, self-regulation, and ultimately self-control. Because when we have self-control, we are leading our brain. Our brain is not leading us.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
And the way
I love your just, I love simplicity stuff. One thing you said that I thought was just really cool. I'm enjoying this conversation. One thing was really cool, Lisa, which was then, Bob and Harold are running. Who's running the business? Is it Bob and Harold or is it the boss?
Right.
And they have to say, but who's actually running the business? And I really like that because I think a lot of leaders in that moment when they don't understand the correlation, that's what's running the business.
Right.
And because of that, creates turmoil, breaks trust, destroys clarity. And then everybody in the organization starts making up their own stories because we're wired to fill the gap.
Right. Well, and it's when I do like leadership workshops and stuff, I introduce Bob and Harold and we stop and have some conversations about what's your Harold looking for? And, there's this study that they did where there's people playing basketball and you count how many times somebody makes a basket.
Yeah.
And at the end, the study, and they asked you how many baskets. And then they say, do you see the giant gorilla that just walked through the floor? Right.
Oh, yeah. Love that.
People miss it. And I truly believe there are thousands of gorillas, of positive, beautiful, kind people, wonderful moments, joyful things that are happening in our world. These gorillas are walking around all over the place, but we don't even see them.
Yeah.
Because our Harold is so pre-wired to look for things that confirm uncertainty or fear or people are mean or whatever those kinds of biases are. And so we have these conversations and then I do an exercise with teams. It's called Name It, Own It, Control It. And I'm like, all right, first of all, let's figure out what is your stress journey? Like what happens to your body when you're stressed, aside from Harold and Bob taking over?
Sure.
So they start talking about, I get a tightness in my throat or my chest pounds or whatever. So we kind of talk about that. Then I say, what does your body look like when you're stressed? And this one lady was like, I don't know what I look like. And her partner was like, I do. She said, your eyebrows disappear up into your bangs. She was like, really? And so you write that down. And then the third question is, what is Harold telling you when you're
Yeah.
stressed? So what is that underlying fear? I'm not good enough. People don't like me. What's your pet fear, right?
Yeah.
And then the second column, so that's naming it and understanding. You have these really great conversations and people laugh and it develops a sense of camaraderie because I'm like, oh my God, I have that happen too. Like
Yeah.
I get like that too. I get blotchy or I get, then you do like, how do we calm our bodies down? And you can give them some breathing tactics, vagal nerve exercises, all the stuff that people are kind of into right now.
Sure.
But here's the really important part. The control it part is we want to have agency and power in our context, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the third column of it is what can people do to help me? And the fourth is what should they not do? And those are the really interesting conversations that build trust on the team because we all experience stress and it's okay, right? So there's no shame in it.
Yep.
We all experience it slightly differently.
Yep.
Our little brains are telling us different fear messages. But at the end of the day, you might want to hug and I might want to just escape for a minute. And
Right.
so then once everybody has their name it, own it, control it chart, then we say, okay, so if you're in a meeting and her eyebrows are gone, take a break, right? Nothing productive is happening at that point, and any decisions you make at that point are going to get unraveled in the next meeting. So pay attention to the humans, and sometimes too, as a leader, if your humans are starting to get super stressed, you can say, am I saying this the wrong way? Or I'm clearly not addressing this
Yeah. Yeah.
the way they need it.
I love those. And it is that the generic term is state of awareness. But
Yeah.
in that state of awareness, there are so many things. Speaking of sales, right? So I carried a bag for many years myself. One of the things we learn in sales is this thing called mirroring, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you're sitting there and you're sitting there, I'm going to sit there like this because that means you're going to trust me, or
Yeah.
I'm going to
Then I'm
lean
going to do it
forward,
too.
or I'm
Yep.
going to do this, or I'm going to,
Yep.
I'm going to assume I'm going to mirror who you are, and therefore you're going to identify with. But which is an interesting philosophy because it doesn't work, but it's fascinating because I think a lot of leaders get hung up on the where I'm trying to get to. I call it the do. Where am I trying to get to? And I'm going to do this to get there without the pause. And the pause is that awareness of what's going on in the room. Do we have clarity? Can people actually tell me what I just told them?
Right.
Do they?
Right.
Which is an indicator, one, that they're willing to understand. They may not agree, which is okay. But at least we can have a conversation and we can do that. But I love about the eyebrows disappearing in the forehead. I got to work with an FBI negotiator once, and he was teaching me facial expressions on what to watch for. And it was fascinating. And he was critiquing me as he went through it.
That would be fun. I would love to meet that person.
I was terrified. So like, you read my mind? But it's interesting you talk about that because I think one of the things that comes out of that, Lisa, is two things occur. One, and for that state of awareness, the very first is you can shatter trust. Right. The second thing is you can reinforce trust.
Yep.
So I would love to listeners to kind of hear from you because I talk about trust all the time. In my mind, one old guy's formula for doing stuff. Trust is the foundation, and there's a lot that it takes to build. Trust isn't asked for. There's a lot of things that have to happen. So what happens in the brain around trust, right? And what is the brain doing that creates trust, and then what is the brain doing once trust is broken?
Right. So those filters that Harold uses, those sensory associations, they're built through repetition, experience, and emotion, and so they can be built over just repetition of something that's inane, but like the more experiential and emotional things are, the quicker those associations are formed and stick. And so when you're thinking about trust, so trust contains 5 components. So the first component is benevolence, and then there's competence, and then honest, open, and reliable. If you have those 5 qualities, you've earned people's trust. So what's happening in the brain is that when I'm acting out trustful activities, right? Things that
Yeah.
people recognize that way, then the association is I'm safe. And our brain is all about keeping us alive and keeping us safe.
Yeah.
And so if I have a leader who is reliable, who I believe knows what he's doing or she's doing, who I believe is there for good to support me, isn't trying to just squash me to work me to death.
Right.
And if they're open and, then, and they're honest, then I feel safe. And when I feel safe, my brain is calm. And it also has to do with engagement, because if you've ever walked into a meeting and you go, oh, these are not my people, you shut down, right? Your brain sends up like danger, danger. But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
walk in and you're like, oh, these are my people, you're open, you're ready to collaborate, you're ready to contribute.
Yeah.
And so trust is critical for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, I love the parts that you talked about that go into trust. And if I may indulge, just leaders, just take a moment, get your pencil and write these things. So the pieces of trust are.
Yep. It's benevolence.
Yep.
It's competence, honesty, openness, and reliability.
Yeah. Love that.
And you think about, you've got, how do you establish those? Well, you establish them through how you plan. So
Mhm.
are you clear? Are plans coherent? Do people understand what they're supposed to do at the 10,000 in the 10-foot level, right?
Right.
So that helps establish that competence and reliability, how you communicate, how you coach, how you set up teams,
Right.
the environment and the culture that you set up. All of those things should be strategic and really thinking through the lens of the human system and what do humans need? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
what a leader needs to do first and foremost is have an environment that is psychologically safe.
Well said. Well said. There's an old guy's rule that I've always used. If I go into a meeting and I have 3 people with me and all 3 people agree with me all the time, I'm getting 3 other people. I want
Yeah.
if that's it. One, it's an indicator that I'm not doing something right. If you agree with me all the time. And the
Yeah.
other part is I want you to trust me. So I want you to be
Yeah.
able to tell me what's on your mind without fear of reprisal. Unless you tell me I'm short and overweight, then we got a problem. Now I'm coming for you. So
Right.
that's a different thing. So I'm really kind of curious. So of the 5 pieces, right? And one of the things that I think leaders can do is either through lack of awareness, or I've been blessed in my career to work with some really bad leaders. I'll just call it, because they exist, right? It's like going someplace and eating bad food. Every now and then you run into one who doesn't know how to cook.
Yeah.
So when they're in that scenario of the 5 pieces, how many pieces does it take to break before trust gets shattered?
1.
And then what happens?
And then it starts to erode. And then what happens is you start looking for more examples of where you can confirm that that person's untrustworthy. And people are generally pretty optimistic. People give trust. It's kind of interesting. Like, you think you have to earn it, but people tend to default to, I want to trust you. And they will, in the beginning of a relationship, they will be looking for ways to confirm they've made the right choice, that you are trustworthy. But when you think about the emotional impact, if you're not being benevolent or reliable or open or honest or consistent, then that usually means that I end up with a bad experience because of you. And so that association then of you are a danger to me gets put together. And then the more times that happens, now Harold sees you in the hallway and elevates your stress level and says, here, there's the guy that makes you miserable.
Yeah. I love that, Lisa, because I think at that point, we do start to make our own, we start creating our own stories.
Yeah.
And we go back through those scattered memories that are all through our brain and start connecting those neurons again. Oh, wait a minute. Way back in September, when this person said that, did they really mean this?
Right.
And we fill that gap with a negative thing. And then it compounds over time.
Yeah. Well, and I always use the example of like our perception. You and I can go to the exact same event and have a wildly different experience based on our heralds, right? So reality, if you think of reality like a banana, And then you think of these sensory filters that Harold's pulling up, like a whole bunch of screens or
Sure.
spaghetti strainers. If you shove the banana through there, on the other side, it doesn't look like a banana anymore. So our perceptions are never reality. They're always a filtered view based on how our brain is associating things. So even as a leader, in the moment, you have an employee who's freaking out, or, two employees that are arguing over something. And instead of saying what's going on,
Right.
you have to say, where are the associations their brain's making? Like, I use an example in the book of like, say that I come and say, Becky is constantly needling me. I can't do anything right. She's always criticizing me, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Right.
A good leader is going to ask a couple more questions. Like, give me an example of what kind of feedback has been really valuable to you and who gave it to you.
Right.
Because what might be the problem is maybe I grew up in a family where feedback was reinforcing that I'm a jerk and I'm incapable. So it's not really about Becky's feedback. It's about the association my brain is making between whatever it is she's doing in her feedback and negative feedback I've received and felt in the past. Maybe my parents were super judgy. So understanding that and being able to get at, like, okay, Becky loves getting feedback and constructive criticism, and she's got a super growth mindset. So for her, she thinks she's being helpful. And for you think she's being critical. So having that conversation is different than why did you say that to her, and staying at the surface level of just what happened.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's really important, because if you're willing to have that conversation, both with yourself and with that individual, because when I define companies, when I'm working with organizations, and I define them as merely it's a collection of people in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're all in a relationship to move towards a common outcome, and we have our own personal outcomes, and then the outcomes of the organization that we're all seeking to move towards. And without those kinds of conversations, there's no alignment. You don't know, and you're going to continuously step on landmines. Because one of the most important things is when you come home at the end of the day and my wife says, "How was your day?" I want to say, "Great. Here's the things I did that added value."
Mm-hmm.
Because my self-worth is tied to that.
Yeah.
And rather than saying, "Well, my day sucked because, blah, 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 blah. Andy didn't, recognize, blah, blah, blah. I missed something," or those things kind of go on. So I think those kinds of conversations, there's something else I think that you said that is really important for leaders to think about too. And I love the fact that when we're talking about trust, is that, because I do believe there are the mechanics of trust, the steps of trust, but and trust does take time. But trust is kind of like if you're going out on a date with your spouse, you don't want to go somewhere hoping the band sucks.
Right. Right.
You're not going. That's not your intention. It's like I'm going here because I know the food's going to be bad and the music is going to suck. Let's go.
Yeah.
You're hoping, and it's an unknown. You're hoping for a complete opposite kind of an experience. And I love the fact that you mentioned that from a trust perspective, that when we enter into that beginning of that relationship, people are really hoping to find that positive foundation.
Yeah.
And as
and
the
that's
leader,
where context, right. You have to develop it. And that's where the context piece, I think, becomes so important too, because if you're in a toxic environment or a negative environment, then Harold is putting a lot of negative associations together. So there's all those gorillas walking around that you don't even see. And, you have to be intentional to train your brain. And so even some of the things in the book I talk about is like engaging the human system. Our human system craves feedback and celebration, right?
Yeah.
We want to be celebrated. We want to feel like we're important and we help we're meaningful to other people.
Right.
And that's one of the things I see that leaders do really poorly is authentic celebration that builds a sense of collective efficacy and teaming on their teams. It either becomes like, she always gets the prize, and then it separates people.
Yes.
Or it's just dumb celebration that costs the company money. And it's fine. You bought them lunch, great, but it's not going to change their performance if it's not authentic.
Yeah, I love Love that. It's that as one of one of my favorite things to talk about in those moments with clients. This is your podcast, not mine. But one of the things, the difference between inspiration and motivation.
Yeah.
Motivation is extrinsic. It's something I get for doing something. And we love that. It's cool. I can win the trip to Florida and go hang out on Big Pine Key. I can go do stuff like that. Inspiration is what's going to get me out of bed in the morning. That's where context lives. And inspiration is the why I go do what I go do. And that's, and I think a lot of leaders they miss the correlation between the two. Well, we're not performing and we're missing our numbers because by gosh, dag nabbit. I sound like Wile E. Coyote there or something, but my people aren't motivated. So I'm going to motivate them. I'm going to go get 6 new carrots they've never seen before. I'm going to hang them out there and I'm going to create winners and losers.
Yep. And that creates fear too, because maybe you're trying really hard, but you don't have the tools. Your leader assumes that you're unmotivated. And they put more things in place that you don't achieve, and they set up for winners and losers. And so it creates a whole nother layer of fear in your job that, hey, I am trying and you don't even notice. Yeah. And maybe maybe your theory of change is wrong. Maybe we're all doing everything you asked us to do and it's not having an impact on our final outcome data. So maybe what we're doing isn't effective.
Yeah, could very well. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Well, we're at the unelegant part of the podcast that I warned you about, where I get to the end and I kind of go, oh, okay. So a couple of things I'd like to do. First and foremost is this has been a really great conversation of leaders. This is a repeat podcast. Go listen to this 2 times. Listen to what Lisa's talking about. This is really important for you. The very first thing is I would like to, if you talk a little bit about the kinds of clients that you work with, because we're not always, I love telling people, look, I'm not for everybody. Right. Not everybody's for me. Here's who I like to work with and here's who I probably wouldn't be a good fit for. So tell me let's talk a little bit about, because I would like to encourage the listeners to, and in the show notes, listeners, all the information will be there. To come find you and at least have these conversations. What you're doing is really, really important.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I find that I'm most effective with that kind of peer down from the C-suite, like the middle management, VPs over departments, the people the leaders who need to actually get the work done. The C-suite kind of dreams it and monitors it. Yeah. But like those people that really are responsible for getting the right people on the right seat on the right bus and getting them engaged and keeping them motivated to do the work. So that's really kind of my sweet spot is in that level. So it's multiple levels, but generally I don't work with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Sure.
Because their brain's somewhere else.
Yeah, it is. And it's, I really do love that. And I think there's not to digress a little bit on what you're talking, and I love your focus, because one of I think the challenges in an organization is if I go fix the CEO, everything will be fine. And the rule, there's 2 rules I talk all about after 50 years in business and having been a CEO. One of the rules I learned early about myself is what I thought the problem was not the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is here.
Right.
Or here.
Yes. And I think the other thing is CEOs, by and large, don't have a very long tenure. No. But the middle management does. So when you're talking about a transformative shift and a culture shift, if the captain's changing all the time and that's the person that I'm working with, then it doesn't make the organization shift. And that's really my passion is I want to help leaders create spaces and organizations that are highly productive and successful, but are also highly fulfilling and supportive places. People wake up in the morning, they're excited to come to work.
Love that.
And that's really the goal.
Love that. That's when we're fulfilled in our career, it changes everything. Changes our relationship.
Yeah, we're better.
I don't ever talk about work-life balance. There's only life. Work is a part of it, right? Yeah. And it changes our relationship with our friends, our family, our kids.
Yep.
All of that changes. When we come home cranky pants because we're not happy with what we're doing as a career, we spend that energy on other people. Yeah. It gets spent. So, or in harmful ways with ourselves. So I love what you're talking about. leaders, as you listen to this, in the body of the show notes, and at least I generally don't share like URLs and links and stuff verbally, because hopefully people are driving.
Right.
Please don't write stuff down while you're driving. Go sit at home and listen. But in the show notes will be all of the information that you need for the 2 books, for Lisa's 2 books. I would encourage you to get them. And then the links on how to reach out to Lisa. With your permission, I'll include an email address in there so people can reach out to you directly if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we talked a little bit about this before we hit go. I'm a firm believer that leaders succeed by knowing the right expert at the right time who can help with the right thing. Even if we suspect or don't know, have the conversation and uncover whether you're on the right track from that thought. So leaders, I would encourage you, reach out to Lisa, have a conversation, whether it involves Lisa working with you or not. Have the conversation, because at the right time, in the right moment, we engage.
Yep.
Not every time is it always the right time, right moment. So I would encourage you to do that. And then I'll end the podcast with a couple things. The way I always end the podcast is I start in with gratitude. This has really been a good conversation, and your insights have been very valuable. Like the 5 parts of trust, there's a lot of things in here. I've got a scratch note here full of all kinds of things. So leaders, go back and get the transcript, and also read the transcript when we go back through this. But I want to tell you thank you for doing this and for helping me with my mission to empower 1 million leaders. So this has been a powerful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Glad to have you. All right, leaders, 2 things always at the end of every podcast. Give the podcast a no, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. It has nothing to do with vanity numbers. It has to do with how podcast stuff works. When a podcast has no likes and shares, depending upon the platform you're listening on, it elevates the podcast so that the podcast can be seen. When the podcast is seen, then it meets the mission, which is to empower 1 million leaders. So if you've learned something today, or if you know another leader who could use what Lisa talked about, share this podcast with them. Send them a note and say, listen to what Lisa talks about. The last thing is, when you listen to the podcast, do it with an open mind and sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and move what you hear from entertainment to action. Take note and try some of the things that Lisa talked about today. It's going to be imperfect, and hence the opportunity to reach out and say, I think I did this and screwed it up. Can you help me? Which is the perfect opportunity. So do that. And I'll thank everybody. Again, I'm Dolan White. This is the Next Interview Show podcast. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and I'll see you next Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Pacific.
Thanks for listening to this week's The Next Interview Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and then take time to turn what you heard here into action.